Please note that the meeting is being recorded. Just to take care that other people can see you, and don't screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by this recording. Sounds like a Miranda warning. All supporting materials that have been provided by members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We now, the ground rules. We'll turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, here are the ground rules for effective conduct of this meeting. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through me, taking care to identify yourself. For public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will forward public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak to the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be taken through roll call vote. Okay, so we've established that we have a quorum present. We've gone through these rules. Do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Second, Don Green.
Second.
All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Good, it's unanimous. Approval of minutes of November 19th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Bill Gardner, second Gary Beller. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. So it says next item is welcome to new members if appropriate. Apparently it's not entirely appropriate right now, but I'm very happy that we have 3 prospective new members joining us, and we hope you'll join in with your thoughts because they certainly were of value at the last meeting. And we're happy you're here. As I mentioned, we continue to gently encourage the town manager to have interviews and then get to the approvals. And that's just an ongoing process. So the main on the agenda today, I think there are really sort of two issues. One is what is happening at the short-term working group and what guidance we can give to our appointees, Peter and Bill, to that group. And secondly, I hope we could work through just a couple of the warrants, the citizen warrants, and they're basically those that relate to 2 issues. One, to amending bylaws and zoning laws having to do with short-term rentals, and the second, this sort of omnibus. There are 2 citizen warrants that seek to have the town meeting consider a change in the form of government in Nantucket. Just to let you know, I've not contacted the proponents of those yet because I really thought that we ought to, they're pretty clear and we ought to think about whether we need to hear from them, number one. Number two, I have tried to contact a data expert the data experts that put together the Nantucket data platform information, which is referenced in the agenda, but they've not responded in any way. I'll say this is what, the second or third time we've tried to get their attention, and I don't know whether the group is defunct or one of the individuals is sick or what the story is, but and nevertheless appended are links to the citizen warrant articles and links to the Nantucket Data Project's research and analysis on various Nantucket issues, including seasonal density, which you can access during this on your computer. Lastly, sort of on this subject in general, before we proceed, I do have an email from Kathy Baird, who can't join us today. Kathy's our secretary, and she's on a plane without that doesn't have a Wi-Fi connection right now, so she can't join us. And she sent around a series of comments on the short-term rental working group addressed to each one of the members. And so I thought that as it would be appropriate for us to include the written comments in the minutes for this meeting, because they should be a matter of public record, because they were sent around to the the entire membership. And so I think, have you seen them and read them, Kathy's comments? Yeah,
there's a lot in there, Peter.
Yeah. Rather than have a fulsome discussion of them, I think maybe would somebody move to include them in the records of this meeting, and then we can proceed. Anybody? Peter, motion to include Kathy's comments. Bill, second. All those in favor signify by raising a hand. So I have Don, yes, Gary, yes, Peter, yes, Bill, yes, and myself, yes. So that is.
I hope that's not a surprise to Kathy, but anyway.
No. I responded to her and said I thought this would be appropriate, and she said they were written with that in mind.
Okay.
Okay, so that's good. So Peter, can you, Peter and Bill, can you sort of tell us where things stand? Big headline news yesterday, the day before, after the select board meeting, and this may impact our timeline and everybody else's timeline.
Well, just briefly, obviously, I think everyone should have seen that the select board didn't take a formal vote, but indicated that it would support the idea of having a special ATM in the fall. So that will greatly affect and help actually the short-term rental group do its work. I was able, Bill and I split duties last week or whenever it was, the last meeting, and I got the first half of the meeting, which was, as I understand it later, I got the short straw because it wasn't very exciting. It was Granicus just talking about the data they were collecting, and it was quickly evident that the data they were collecting was not relevant. And Bill got the good discussion about that and the fight. So Bill, why don't you pick it up from there? You're muted, Bill.
Okay, how's it now?
Good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember his last name, but the talkative fellow with
John.
an English background.
John, yeah.
Yeah, John was very vehement that he wanted to cut to the chase, have a member of the working group appointed to deal directly with the Nantucket real estate industry and move the ball forward and get fixed on what we needed to have and what our goal was. And Stacy pushed back quite a bit, and she finally, I think, kind of won the argument by telling him it would violate the open meeting law. But my sense of that second half of that meeting was that Stacy's control over the group is waning, and the group is very dissatisfied with where things stand. I don't know how it happened, but I think something happened after that meeting that led to the select board putting off a meeting on working group proposals until the fall. That's exactly something that I think Gary Beller and I both have espoused. So I think it's a good development.
Yeah, now there's a meeting. There's a meeting tomorrow. I'm sorry, Monday, a lengthy meeting from 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. Of the group. Many of whom will actually be on Nantucket. I will not. And I have not seen the formal agenda. Bill, have you seen the formal agenda yet for that? Bill, you're muted.
No, I have not.
Yeah. So hopefully, I mean, I can't. There's no way that we can go 6 hours more on this without some solid data. And it just underscores what we have been telling the group from day one, which is you need to define the issue, and then we can collect the data. And the other big issue, I think that the other big thing that became very clear is the town made a huge mistake by not including the realtors in this program. Somebody convinced them that the realtors would somehow, have a vested interest. Well, everybody's got a vested interest of one form or another in their views, you can judge their views accordingly. But they have the data. Trying to get all this data off of the rental online groups that doesn't work for Nantucket, because Nantucket people generally rent through the local realtors. So I think that Granicus will finally be meeting with the realtors. I didn't hear how that was ultimately going to be resolved. The issue was, could 1 or 2 people from the group join in with them, and that's where the issue of the open meeting law violation occurred. Bill?
Peter, on Thursday, 2 days ago, Samini, she's Stacy's helper. She sent out an invitation for public input for this big meeting.
I thought, no, that's the following. That's the meeting on the 12th. Isn't that right? That's the following meeting. There is going to be a public meeting on December 12th.
Yes, and
That's
she's
different.
asking for input on that. But that's not
Monday's meeting.
I've never seen an agenda for Monday's meeting.
Right.
At least I don't think I have.
No, I haven't either. Okay. So it's the bottom line is nothing has really, we had some discussion at our last ACNVT meeting. We sent along our comments to the questionnaire, which was, many of you contributed to that, and that was helpful. And basically there's nothing new to report, Peter, other than that.
Yeah.
Sorry to say.
Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, I have some comments. First of all, I must say I am underwhelmed by this fellow from Granicus.
Yep.
I mean, to me, I watched the beginning of that meeting and he presented a ton of data that had absolutely no bearing on any issue relating to Nantucket or short-term rental. And if he keeps talking about New Orleans, where he lives, I'm going to go crazy, although I'm not on the committee and I have no right to, but really, he's doing a disservice to the group. And it was clear from that discussion that none of the data that he presented had anything to do with the issues that we're dealing with. Anyway, the good news that came from the select board from their meeting, as Peter and Bill mentioned, you might have mentioned too, Peter, is that town has finally agreed that instead of rushing the timetable through to try to get something for this upcoming April or May meeting, early May, they have agreed to hold and to support a second town meeting. This is a special town meeting in the fall, probably September or October. So that's the good news. The other good news that came from that, even though there wasn't a formal vote, but everyone signed off, I saw everyone say yes, is that all of the members of the select board said that in view of the fact that they support this special town meeting in September, they would vote against any of the short-term working group, any of the short-term proposals on the current warrant in May. There are, as you know, there are a handful of articles that have been proposed that would do some restricting of short-term rentals. And apparently, it's pretty clear that the select board to a person says we shouldn't really be talking about those things. We should wait until the September or October meeting and do it right. So that I thought was the good news.
Great.
Yeah, just a sort of word of caution that assuming that this scenario plays out, that there is a special meeting to consider the short-term rental issues, that does not mean that the town meeting in May might not take up the citizen warrants that relate to this issue and basically, redraw the landscape on this. And so I think they would have to be either withdrawn or voted down or whatever happened the last time. I don't understand procedurally exactly what that was, put off to a future date. So there's this danger that what I'll call the naked citizen warrants, I think it's 13, 19, 20, and 21, could be acted upon at this town meeting in a way that would change the status quo. And I guess the other danger, potential danger, is that I don't know where the litigation is. What are there 2 litigations or 3 litigations ongoing now? I think
At least 3.
Yeah, fairly early. If litigation is typically slow, because I think they were all, maybe 2 were filed this year and 1 were filed last year. 1 was filed last year, but rulings in those could change the landscape as well. So I agree with everybody that putting this off until a proposal based upon facts and data rather than on emotional reaction to the short-term rental issue is a really good idea. But I also am concerned, that the group still has not really identified the problem and identified what data would be helpful in reaching legislative conclusions. And I'll just tell you that I, as an individual, not as a member of this group, wrote to the moderator, Stacy Smith, I think is her last name, last week or the week before, basically, I would say criticizing is not the right word, but it was a view that despite her trying to get the group to agree on what defining the problem is, that hadn't been accomplished yet, and it was critically necessary in order to get to the end. You need a starting point, and that the data, so far there just was not any relevant data that had been cited or looked like it was being collected. I took the position in this, what I wrote, and I can circulate this to everybody, and I just need to figure out how to do that in a way not to violate the open meeting laws, but maybe I'll send it out and then we can incorporate it in the minutes at a future meeting. I took the position that number one, the problem was density, and I believe this group, what I'll call seasonal density, that drives everybody crazy on the island. You know, so many people during a few weeks of the year that it's hard to get around. It's hard to even, buy stuff at the grocery store. And that perhaps was the problem that could be dealt with by this group. Cited to this Nantucket Data Project report that was based on 2017 information, showing that during probably a 4 or 5 week period of the year, the estimated population on the island was 3 to 5 times the winter population, and taking the position that the infrastructure just has a hard time coping with all that. It drives everybody crazy, and so maybe figuring out how to put some limits on peak season occupancy, so to speak, of the island might ameliorate the problem. And that was that. I also pointed out what is consistent with our group's established policy that any resolution has to treat non-voting taxpayers the same as voting taxpayers, and cited to the Fifth Circuit case that I believe upholds that position, and suggested that some questions that the working group should be asking the lawyers that's advising it. And these are questions that really have been sort of kicked down the road or unanswered by the attorneys. So it was sort of a shot in the dark to perhaps advance the ball on getting to a solution. But it's a shot in the dark because I haven't even heard, what do you call it, a retort or whatever, an echo. I've had no response whatsoever from anybody, but I think it may be something that the group can consider as it goes forward, and adopt some of those positions or not adopt them as you all see fit. But in my mind, that seems to be the problem.
I have a question for Peter and Bill. Since you've been attending all of those meetings, are you able to discern some future point where there might be an accommodation? When I listened to the parts of the meetings and I tried to figure out how are they going to finally work this out, and assuming that they work it out so that whatever they do doesn't discriminate against non-residents like us, then we're basically for it. But the next question is, so what kind of possible regulation in the future might this group come to agreement on that doesn't hurt the locals, doesn't hurt the seasonals, and it just hurts a particular class? There's one point that I wanted to bring up a little bit, and that is that the Monomoy people are screaming about commercial ownership, and I guess to me, residential use is residential use. If people are sleeping there, that's a kind of residential use. But the question is, according to at least the people in the Monomoy camp, and maybe a few others, they would come to the conclusion that the ultimate regulations should put restrictions on rental capacity or ability for strictly commercial institutions. So let's forget about for a minute the LLCs and the trusts and all of that, which get the conversation quite confused. The question is, if the group decided that maybe that's the only problem we have when you have a corporation that just owns these properties and they have nobody who actually lives in the house from the corporation. It's just corporate investing. And the question is, how would we feel if there were restrictions on that? The first question is, how would we feel? The second question is, would it be legal for the town of Nantucket to actually limit the ability of corporations, strictly commercial entities, from buying properties and not buying properties, but engaging in short-term rental? So what do you think about that?
Well, Gary, I mean, I think you're headed in the right direction in the sense that I think that it's reading the tea leaves there. That's, you know, it's easy to point at the big, you know, bad commercial developers who are not present on island, and I think that's likely where they're headed. But you know, the town has regulated that with regard to the big box stores and what have you. Obviously, that's a different, you know, it's a commercial use clearly, but it's not a residential use. But my guess is they probably can regulate that. The other issue is going to be, it doesn't have to be, you know, I think it doesn't have to be just a big corporation, you know, a Marriott or what have you, coming in with their timeshares or what have you. But it could also be, you know, individual investors, you know, who just buy, and there are probably a bunch of them that, you know, investment property and never show up, you know, and never live in it themselves and rent it during the course of the year. My guess is there may be an attempt to regulate that. I think we're making some progress. We'll see. We haven't had a more fulsome discussion yet on the issue of the Fifth Circuit case, in the sense that you cannot distinguish, arguably, between, or you should not be able to distinguish between part-time and full-time residents. But it's still too early, I think, to tell where they're headed. I mean, there was some discussion at the last meeting. Dave Iverson, I think, made the point, which many of us, I think, agree with, that, you know, and this ties into what Peter was just saying, that, you know, we're talking about, you know, the problem we have may not be a short-term rental issue at all. I mean, are the short-term rentals really contributing to the quote unquote overcrowding during the height of the season? Those houses would likely be, they're not going to be sitting empty. You know, I mean, people will come and use them themselves, but they can't rent them. You know, I'm a believer that this is a congestion problem. We know this is an issue that the ACNVT has been dealing with every year. We talk about parking, we talk about traffic, we talk about all the things that now everybody's sort of saying is an STR problem. We'll see. It's still too early.
Yeah, Donna?
Yeah, I'd like to comment if I can. Peter, to your issue about the STRs and individual investors, I guess many of you read the article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. David Mann purchased a house at Lincoln Circle, 5 bedrooms, and he's turning it into an STR.
Yeah.
That's one issue.
But it's it's a $20 million purchase. So
yes, exactly.
That would never be a house used by the locals to save their jobs. Believe me.
I don't know. I think that's up for, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to go back to, which we've all been concerned about, is data. I read the NDP report, and it was very interesting about the ebb and flow of seasonal tourists and seasonal residents. And the numbers are, unfortunately, sadly, of 2017. So much has changed between 2017 and 2022. Third comment I'd like to make is this whole thing about the realtors. Is there, and this may be, I'm naive about this, but why can't committees ask the realtors for that information? I mean, they are working on Nantucket. Wouldn't they want to contribute information that would help the STR group? Because Granicus, really, I mean, I've been through McKinsey and all sorts of other groups. This is very much like that. And it's a cookie cutter presentation. They may add a couple of numbers, but it is unfortunately largely irrelevant. So could we not invite, why do the realtors have to be on a board? It doesn't matter if they are or aren't, but couldn't they offer their information? And what about Airbnb? Are they able to divulge their information? And VRBO?
Let me
More
quickly,
data, concrete data, relevant data, timely data helps us make any kind of decision.
if I could just quickly respond to a couple points, and then
Yes.
Bill, I may have other thoughts. On the air, just to the last point you made, on the Airbnb and the other commercial computer bases, that Granicus has scraped that information, so that is available. And they're using it. But the point being that most people on island don't use those. They do use, as you point out, the local realtors. That
Right.
information, it's not an issue apparently of them not wanting to give it to us. They're not on the. It's a matter of they want, or somebody wants, a liaison between the committee and the realtors. I mean, believe me, it's almost embarrassing to describe how ridiculous this is. I mean, it should not be
No.
difficult. It
No,
should not
it
be
shouldn't.
difficult to get the information. Bill, I didn't say to the end, Bill, was it ultimately resolved as to how they were going to get the information from the realtors?
Well, yes and no. It was resolved in the sense that Stacy said that she would be the interface with the realtors and come back to us. I don't know if she's going to do that or not, or whether she can.
Yeah,
Again, it's a pity that the working group never could have a representative from the real estate industry. That's sorely needed.
Yeah.
But again, to echo what Peter said, the 800-pound gorilla in the room has always been whether short-term rentals adversely affect affordable housing on Nantucket. And I've been watching this for a long time, and I don't see any indication that the answer is yes. No one seems willing to just come right out with it.
I mean, ultimately, let me say that there was I guess there is a warrant that would suggest that certain amounts of money the town makes off the STRs would go to affordable housing, and that ultimately may be, if you want to do that, that's maybe a way to sort of satisfy some people that there's a connection. But that's about as far as I think it really ought to go.
Yeah, I think that in terms of money flows, there are two sources of money from the STRs. One is this registration process will have a fee, but as I understand the discussion about that, the fee can't really exceed the cost of administration of the registration, inspection, whatever they're going to be doing. So that particular fee can't support short-term housing. But I think the Massachusetts STR law gives the municipalities who want to use it the opportunity to tax the STRs, tax the rentals off the STRs, and that could be used for any public purpose. And so it is, I think it could be a viable, a good source of funding, and indeed making the connection that STRs are good for affordable housing, might be difficult to make for some people's minds because their minds are made up, but it's a fact that it's another source of revenue for that purpose. In the little thing that I wrote, I took the bold position without any factual backup that there is no relationship between affordable housing and STRs, and that's just it's kind of a sideshow, and the real problem is this congestion density issue. But anyway, it's what it is. should we, I'm just wondering whether it would be helpful to us in this whole process, and we're only one small voice, to have the real estate people at a future meeting, ask them to be at a future meeting, tell them what they,
Sure.
it's kind of like sort of a shadow government type of situation. This is something that the STR working group should be doing. And as I think they're doing it, but just trying to figure out how to do it. And I don't think we want to get in the way. How can we be helpful?
Peter, I think let's see what happens on Monday. I think we're going to learn a lot more. I mean, the 6-hour meeting should develop something, and
Okay.
I'm pretty confident that we're going to get the information from the realtors in
Okay.
one form or another.
Yeah, Don?
Well, one, I haven't heard that this group has not put up the questions they want to answer. And I think that should be first. You know, they should agree, do STRs affect affordable housing? Is congestion a problem? You know, then they know what they should be looking for. Otherwise, like the consultant can go all over the place when he talks. The other thing that I had heard mentioned is pricing. The cost of housing on this island is what's holding back affordable housing, and also makes the so-called corporate STRs very attractive to people because they can make significant sums. Somewhere they have to meet up profits with livability on the island. You know, if how much they're making is interfering with people's lives and ability to make it a decent living, you know, that sometime, not only here but everywhere, has to be addressed.
Yeah. Donna, you had,
Because
I'm sorry,
because-
Donna. Didn't mean to
yeah,
cut you off.
it's one of the reasons we're sort of going backwards. You know, we just put more and more people. You don't have the help, and they don't have the ability to pay for things.
Donna, you had a comment?
I actually have a question at this point because I was agreeing with a lot that Donald was saying, but the position of this group, this committee, do you make comments or recommendations to the select board? How does this whole diagram work? What do
So
you
what,
do?
our purpose in the legislation is to provide advice to the select board.
Okay,
And so from time to time, we'll take a vote on an issue and then send a letter to the select board and even appear at the meeting if it's something that matter of select board discussion and advocate whatever our advice has been. We've extended that further in two ways. One, which I think is recognized by existing bylaws, and the other perhaps not. And that is whatever position we take officially with the select board, we will often also take in FinCom hearings. And the way in which the town meeting process works is all these citizen warrants are reviewed by the FinCom, Financial Committee or whatever it stands for, looking at, I guess, the financial impact one way or another of the proposal under consideration. And so we have provided testimony and our select board advice to the FinCom and engaged with them on various proposals. And then the last way is that the bylaws provide that the representative of the non-voting taxpayers may address the annual town meeting. And we've done that as well from time to time, or when, because usually the meetings are times when none of us are on the island. our position will be stated by the moderator. And, saying this is basically what we would say if we were there in person. So that's the sort of the official ways in which we fulfill our mandate under the bylaws of the town.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any disagreement with what I just said? I think that's just the way it's done, and that's what, in the years I've been on, I guess it started mostly with writing, writings to the select board, and then a little bit of the annual town meeting, and then more and more of the FinCom involvement. And sometimes when there are really hot issues in the past, the chair of the FinCom has attended our meetings to sort of see what is going on, and that sort of thing. So, Gary?
I agree with the comments here that it's really a tragedy that the real estate brokers don't have a seat at the table. But I remember why they don't. I think they got lousy legal advice from the town council. I seem to recall a meeting early on where John Giorgio thought that there was a conflict of interest, and so the town didn't do that. But it really is a shame, for whatever reason, that they don't have a seat at the table, and it just shows that the facts that are necessary to have an intelligent discussion have not yet been made available. I had a thought about that article that Donna referred to yesterday in the Wall Street Journal. They have, on Fridays, they have a mansion section. And they talk about these big $10 million, 20, 30, 50, $150 million transactions, whether it's in Los Angeles. And there was a big headline saying $20 million sale in Nantucket. And there was this article that talked about somebody who's a Boston investor who spent $20 million to buy this house on Lincoln Circle. He's going to fix it up a little more. He's going to redo it, even though it was worth $20 million to start with. And he's going to use it for rental again. And they said he has a few other properties that he has on the island he does the same thing with. And it started me thinking, I wonder if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because, it means that clearly whatever these very wealthy investor types have, they're really not on the island. They may have a representative there that is required by, Article 39 and stuff like that, but that's not the same as saying, you're our neighbor and you worry about our neighborhood. And I don't know and I think certainly the real estate brokers would say, don't tell us we can't do that. That's how we make all our money. Just think of the commission that two of the firms made, Lee Real Estate, and I forget the other firm, Berkshire Hathaway, right? They got the commission on a $20 million transaction. Okay, that's 5 or 6%. So to the extent that we all concluded at some point that, this really isn't healthy, it's to have all these very high-end investors come in, buy these high-end properties, rent them out when they're not being used, when they're not being rented, they're basically empty. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think the realtors might say, you don't want to take away, that's what feeds us, we get the commissions on all of these transactions. And of course, to a certain extent, these same investors, when they buy properties for 20 million or whatever, and they fix them up again, or they pay hopefully local contractors. So that's also good for the economy. But that's one of the issues that we all have to be thinking about. Sometimes I say, gee, that's not a good thing to have people own all this property. They have no roots on the island. They don't really have an emotional connection to the island. But it's good for the real estate brokers and it's good for some of the service people. So I don't know what the answer is.
Well, Gary, that point has been, I mean, that point has been sort of touched upon, and I'm sure it'll be discussed much more fully over the course of the next, series of meetings with the SDR group. I mean, there's one particular fellow, again, I don't know last name, Jim is his first name, who has been hammering this concept of being invested in your quote unquote invested in your community. And I think that that has some sway, and as does this whole issue of commercial, strictly commercial entities with no local ownership. I mean, I think what's going to be interesting is, for example, I keep forgetting the name of the group, but we've talked about it, the group out of Boston that owns that has a series of homes, 5 or 6, 7, 10, I don't know what it is, and they also own the house, the hotel there on Broad Street, who actually, but they're local. They're it's a corporation, but it's owned by local people, right? What's the name of the group, Gary? I think who I'm referring to.
That's not the Copley
I think
Group.
it's Copley.
No, the
Copley,
Copley
right,
Copley
right.
Group.
No, it's
So
not the
that's-
Copley Group.
It is the Copley Group.
Is
it
it the
is-
Copley Group or Blue Flag?
It's Blue
Copley Group.
Flag, who you're talking about,
No,
Peter. But the
no.
Copley Group, they live on the island. Well,
No, I understand. That's my point. That's my point. My point is, the Copley Group also, by the way, does own, I believe, the one of the hotel. It's at the corner of across from the old from the old administration building there, which has a restaurant. It has the restaurant in it as well.
The Grayson House.
That's right. They own
Graydon
the
House.
That's right.
No, I don't think they own that. It's another group from Boston.
Oh, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the
not,
point is.
it's not
The
Copley.
point is that are you going to be able to distinguish between a Copley Group and a Marriott? I mean, that you're really starting to slice and dice here, and we just have to but there is concern about that. I'd hate to see. I mean, I must say, my sense is, I haven't seen the data. It's all anecdotal. That the Copley Group has very nice homes. They have local people. And they're doing it. They're doing a nice job, and no one's complaining about the noise except the people in Matic and Monomoy, who just don't want it, because they think it's lowering the value of their home.
Well, that's an issue too.
Yeah, Ralph?
This may be preaching to the choir to the attorneys who are on this committee, but it seems to be that the only two solutions to a perceived conflict of interest is either don't have them on the committee or do. And there's always a third way to handle conflicts of interest, and that's to observe them, be aware of them, and then make a management plan. So there should be a management plan for the conflict of interest of real estate brokers who could be on the committee. It's very important for their expertise and their data to be represented. You just have to manage it, that's all.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And what I was thinking is that they could be perhaps non-voting members, because the issue really is the vote, isn't it? And that's where the conflict comes in. Otherwise, you advocate for whatever position you're advocating, and sometimes you can even say it's obvious what that your position creates a conflict. So I think it's just a voting issue, and I think it's a little bit late in the game to reconstitute the shape of the table, but it might be easy to either have them as a non-voting member or give them something where they don't have to wait until the public comment section, which is usually at 1 a.m. in the morning, or to make a suggestion or a comment. It could be that easy. Yes, Ralph.
We follow up with an analogy.
Yeah.
Imagine that you're in the federal administration, and this is an analogy from my world of medical science. You're trying to make a national committee of experts on Parkinson's disease. And you decide that you're not going to include any people from big pharma because they have a vested interest and obvious conflict of interest. Well, you'd be eliminating thousands of people who have the greatest expertise.
Yeah.
And it's a fallacious argument. Instead, you bring them under the tent and you manage the conflict. That's
Yeah.
my point.
So that could, Donna?
Yeah, I think, Peter, to your point, I think if I recall correctly, there was some antagonism, if you will, about putting the realtors on because of the vote.
Yeah.
But if they could be, to your point, if they could be on, because they're essential to data. We can't do anything without correct, timely data, and they can provide it very easily.
Yeah, and it's even more than data. They're the experts in the area, or at least one of the experts in the area.
Mhm.
But I want to sort of go back to something that we've been discussing, and because I think what is being missed in this conversation is, again, going back to this notion of density is the real problem. What we have is let's say 5,000 houses on the island. And the problem is that short-term renting basically is very efficient in filling the bedrooms in those houses during the entire season. I have a house, I don't rent it, and there are a lot of, the house is empty, a substantial amount of time up there. But I'm sort of beating around this, but the problem is that we have facilities that provide too many bedrooms at certain times of the year. And how do you regulate that, or can you regulate it? It doesn't really matter who the owner is. Just a lot of bedrooms and too many people. How does one moderate that? And oh, by the way, there are more bedrooms every year, whether they're high-end bedrooms or low-end bedrooms. The amount of construction going on, certainly in my neighborhood and probably in your neighborhoods, is it's basically accelerating rather than slowing down or moderating. So this problem is just going to get worse and worse. What do you do? It's an island. I don't know, but I think we can talk about the $20 million house, but that's a kind of an 80-20 issue, in that 80% of the value is in a very small number of houses, and 20% is in a lot of houses which have lots of bedrooms. So regulating corporate owners or the Lincoln Circle owner, it's not even going to make a dent in the problem. As to how you might regulate, if you want Gary's point on commercial ownership, we do have bylaws, or the town has bylaws, that regulate transient accommodations. And that is, the number of hotels and hotel rooms and where they can be located. I think they can only be located in commercial districts and what have you. And it may be that there's a definitional difference that would create a regulation that these totally corporate-owned houses are really in the transient business rather than in the short-term rental business. I don't know. Just sort of tossing out ideas. I know that one of the Massachusetts cases on this area basically found that short-term rentals were not transients and therefore did not fit within that definition. So those are just a bunch of scattered ideas, but I do think the central point is the number of bedrooms on the island and the ease and efficiency of filling those bedrooms. Typically, people had houses and they were, half empty or all empty during a substantial part of the year. Yeah, Gene.
Yeah, I think it's more than just the number of bedrooms. It's also the number of people occupying the house on any given week.
Yeah.
I mean, our house has 4 bedrooms. We could have 8 or 10 people in there. Most weeks during the summer, it's just my wife and I. So there's just 2 of us. We may have to go to the market once or twice a week, if there were 10 people occupying the house, they'd be at the market 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, in addition to going in scattered directions. So they need 2 or 3 cars, or 2 cars and an Uber, and who knows what. So I think it's this, what the short-term rental system does is just add a lot of, increases the capacity of the house. It goes from 2 or 3 people in the house to 8 or 10 in the same house. So I don't know how you deal with that, but that's even more of an issue if you think density is the key driver.
Yeah, well, I think there are ways, and that's a good point. It does, I would put it slightly differently. The short-term rental doesn't increase the capacity of the house, it fills the capacity of the house. The houses have whatever capacity they have, but it may be that you have a regulation that says you can't rent to more than 4 people at a time, and that would be across the board. Or something like that, and that might tamp down exactly what you're saying, Gene, tamp down the, you know.
I mean, many years ago, there was a method of dealing with that came up that didn't go anywhere, but it was to limit the number of vehicles that could be parked, used in any house. And originally, the town, whoever brought this issue up, said that if you're not a year-round resident, you can only have 1 vehicle for the house. And you know, that didn't go anywhere, but that was one mechanism of dealing with the density problem. And this was 20 years ago. This was not recently. So the issue of crowds on the island for those 5 or 6 weeks that you speak about, Peter, is nothing new. It's been, you know, we've been on the island 35, 40 years, and it's been, there have been those kinds of problems when it, but.
Well, isn't the de facto regulator of vehicles on the island, and maybe it's just set at the wrong level, is the number of ferry, you know, reservations there are. I don't think that's expanded over the years, and indeed, if anything, probably more of the ferries have been taken up by commercial loads than cars. Of course, that doesn't stop people from having, you know, lots of cars, you know, that they keep on the island year round, or rental fleets. But it seems to me that the regulating the number of cars would just be, you know, stop the ferry fleet from expanding.
I just use that as an example of other ways of dealing with the density problem, not one that's necessarily viable, but.
Peter, you remember that when we had Rob Rainey as our guest at our meeting, the point that he made that so surprised me is that there is no capacity for growth. Every time slot that is available is taken. And even if they wanted to add a few more round trip ferries, they couldn't do it because there's nowhere on the island to go except where it is. And those slots are completely full. But it brings me back to one of these basic issues. It starts off the fact that Nantucket has a small number of actual hotel rooms. And it's a very attractive island, so people want to come here. And so rather than be stymied by the fact that there's only 3 or 4 or 5 hotels on the island, people started using short-term rentals. And that increased the economy because more and more people were coming to the island. So the question that I have, that I think about sometimes is, let's suppose that there were some rules that the town tried to put into effect that would limit the ability of homeowners to a certain number of short-term rentals. And the question I have is, since Nantucket is such an attractive place, and since our world is awash with funds anyway, everybody has enough money to you know, do everything they want to do. my question that I ask myself is, so if there was a law that restricted the number of short-term rentals, would that really have a negative impact on the economy? How many homes that would have been sold yesterday and last year and the year before would not have been sold if one of the conditions of the sale was that you only were allowed 6 weeks rental, period, you know? And I don't know, I mean, Nantucket's an attractive enough island so that it just seems to me like you have a lovely home and you don't rent it out when you're not there. I have 2 homes in our family, one for my daughter, one for me, and we don't rent them out when we're not there. So there are a lot of people who, like us, would be willing, because they want to spend time on Nantucket and they love the thought of the, the ambiance of the island. They're going to buy something, they can afford it, they're going to buy something on Nantucket. And so if they can't do short-term rentals, they won't. And that, to me, the question is, will that really, I mean, the real estate brokers probably are terrified that it would cause a diminution of their revenues, but I don't know if that's the case, because it might make the island even more attractive if there was a little less congestion and people could.
But Gary, I think,
Go ahead, Peter.
in fairness, there are a lot, apparently, at least, again, it's anecdotal, we need to find the data, but there apparently are a lot of people who can afford to own a house on Nantucket, who are able to do that only because they are able to get rental income for, during the high season. And as we know, obviously, you can carry your mortgage, you can pay a good chunk of your mortgage down by just renting a few months during the year. So that's I think there may be, again, another possible issue here may be to sort of limit, again, we're talking about basically 8 weeks, July to August, maybe 10 weeks, to limit the number of registrations that are available and make it a lottery of some sort, to see if that, I think that would be a tougher argument to sell, but that might have an effect. So there are, we just got to see how it moves.
And
the real estate people would obviously be very much against that, right? Because they're making commissions on every rental.
Yeah, but it's I think part of the problem here is it's a local problem, it's a national problem, that what would you call sort of a constant upward trajectory. More is always better, but that may not be the situation in a place like Nantucket and a number of other places where there's a limit to the capacity of the island to maintain a certain quality and standard of life. And so continued development is I think part of the issue here, although, when I guess I bought my place 15 years ago and I've been coming to the island maybe on and off for 40 years. And any year I was on there, people were making the same complaints as we're hearing now, too many people, do this, do that. And so when there were half as many people, 15 years ago, let's say. But I think we are where we are today with this issue because it's reaching a tipping point at long last, and it has to be reckoned with. And the fact, it just may be that the number of transactions every year, real estate transactions that yield commissions, can't keep increasing. And even the smaller volumes, sometimes the commissions can go up because the values have gone up. The same thing with contractors and landscapers. It may be that you just reach a point where 3,000 lawns is 3,000 lawns, and there's plenty of business for people to do, but that business is not going to grow appreciably because we can't have 4,000 lawns over time. I don't know, but my sense is that's what this issue is all about, and it's just targeted one segment, which is short-term rentals, which is clearly part of the picture. But we spent a lot of time and effort on this, and do whatever you're going to do, and has no appreciable effect because other just as important or more important aspects are continuing to grow.
The question of data, the one that initially we talked about, is this question, which has not been answered. To what extent can we attribute the growth of short-term rental with the loss of the ability of locals on the island to find a home? And my recollection is that before these debates started, the planning board, on which Dave Iverson is a member, it did a study, and they found only 5 instances in a period of 9 years where they could say, as a result of the sale of this particular property, which was sold and then turned into a short-term rental, it meant one less home for a local. But the question is, what ability do we have to find data that would make that connection? Because that's what this debate is all about. It's not really about noise. That's covered by the other regulations. The debate is how much are short-term rental activities contributing to the loss of the ability of locals on the island to find a home. And to me, half the problem is the land bank, because every time, or the conservation groups, they keep buying more property. And once they buy the property, it's done. And there's not going to be anything built on it. Once again, as I've said before, if I had a magic wand, I would quickly say, okay, certain land bank property can be given for $1, for use for local housing, locals, full-time housing, guaranteed only without short-term rental. Because there's lots of land bank property that is available that could be built on near existing neighborhoods today. And that wouldn't interfere with the public enjoyment for most of the land bank property. But no one wants to hear those. No one in town seems to want to hear that conversation, so.
Donna?
I'd like to comment about that, and it goes back to people are buying 10, 15, and $20 million homes. And if you're going to rent them and make $400,000 in the summer, it's going to be hard for anybody to buy something for their families on Nantucket. So you have these dynamics going on, and they don't meet.
Yeah. So I think we've pretty much talked ourselves out, and we, as people who only have the ability to advise others, and our advice right now, I guess, is going to Peter and Bill to help them represent the group as this goes on. And I guess we should first ask Peter and Bill, now that it appears that your term of servitude is being extended by maybe 6 months or so, are you guys still willing to plunge forward on this issue?
One meeting at a time, you know. Let's see. I mean, let me tell you this: if they make all these meetings 6 hours like the one Monday, the answer will be a resounding no. But I think I think it'll get, hopefully this will get moving. You know, that, you know, hopefully we'll make some progress and it'll be more rewarding, so to speak.
My feeling on the issue is that as long as Don Quixote is in the saddle, Sancho Panza will be here.
Well, good. I feel much better. But we still have not defined where that damn windmill is that you're tilting at, and that's the problem. So we've spent a lot of time on this. Does anybody have a further? Yes, Donna. You need to unmute yourself. You're on mute.
Got it.
Yeah.
Comment, we have the old mill.
The old mill, yeah, but I'm afraid that everybody's running at length into that old mill, and that's not going to do any good. That's good. We've expended about an hour and 15 minutes on this. We obviously have a lot of thoughts and I have a feeling there's a growing consensus, but there's no consensus that reaches a conclusion at this point, and this is a sort of moving target. So let's I guess the question, rather than going over the 4 citizen warrant articles that affect this issue, I guess would it be fair to say that it is the thought of this group that if there is a fall town meeting, that our advice would be to have either have all 4 of them withdrawn or oppose all 4 of them being acted upon at the May town meeting.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and-
absolutely.
because 3 of them are, I think, favorable to what I think our position is, and 1 is absolutely unfavorable to it. And we could take positions, like that. But I think, why don't we see what is developing on the timing, and then we can come back to them. One thing I would like to discuss, so that I think that's okay with the group. One thing I think it would be good to start discussion on, and then we can get some people in to talk to us if we want to, is the town governance proposals. Just briefly, there are 2 of the proposals. I think it's Article 1 and Article 6. And Article 1 is just basically a proposal to have the town meeting consider a change in government to a town council form of government without really any bones on it whatsoever. Our Article 6 is basically a full-fledged bylaw that, soup to nuts spelling out of what this government would look like. I've skimmed through Article 6, and I have to say that my only question is whose bylaw did they copy, and what did they add to it or subtract from it? I'd almost like to have a red line version of what it is that they put there, so that because just reading through it, it seems to be an appropriate way of doing it. My own position, and I this is kind of like I don't know whether we're touching the 3rd rail or not touching the 3rd rail on this particular subject, but my own position is that we could talk about changing the town meeting as being pro-democratic. I think most people would think it's anti-democratic, because you can't stand up in a town meeting and say what you want to say. And right now, I guess it's either 10 or 15 people just sign these things, and they can, the warrants can be then acted upon at a town meeting. There's a distancing between the individual voter and the actual legislation by going from a town meeting form to a city council form. But my argument goes kind of like this: if you compare the attendance at the annual town meeting, number 1, just the gross attendance at an annual town meeting, and number 2, the number of votes you get on critical issues, to the number of votes that are received in a polling booth each year or every other year, however many times, for town elections, I think you're getting about 50% of the electorate going to the polling booth, and maybe 10% of the electorate actually voting on critical things. And so I would say that data supports the fact that it's actually more democratic to have a town council form of government, especially as it's spelled out in Article 6, where there's lots and lots of room for public participation, for recalls, for this call, that call. And it would be very productive and much, much better for the town. I also, some of you may have read an article within the last month or so on the Australian form of democracy, where it's a requirement that everybody vote. And if you don't vote, there's some modest penalty for not voting. It's sort of the reverse of being paid to vote. If you don't vote, you have to pay not to vote. But the point being that you get much wider participation, and therefore there tends to be fewer very, very far from the mean type of things that that get passed in the more voters there are, the more likely you're going to have an outcome that is actually acceptable to a majority of the voters. So I think we could be supportive of a change in government, but we need to sort of figure out whether that is the right thing for our group to do. Ralph.
I just will follow up with your comment about whether one system is more democratic than the other. And I support your point of view that they actually, despite the word all in all town meeting, it's actually anti-democratic in this sense. It's not a matter of how many people vote. It's a matter of the dynamic in the room. Having been in governance bodies where the whole population, this was at a college, the whole population gathered around and they controlled governance of the group. You can do that when you have a whole population that is in the dozens or hundreds. You can't do it in the thousands, but you can do it. But the trouble is, if you've ever been in one of those groups, one person speaks, the second person pops up and agrees, and the third person pops up and agrees. Suddenly, the dynamic is that the question is settled. It's the dynamic of tiny minorities looming as if they are majorities. So that's how all town meetings go down the tubes, or they don't always, but it's the tyranny of the minority based on vocalization in the group. So I'm agreeing with you. It's sort of anti-democratic.
Yeah. It's another detail of the situation, which I think, what I'm trying to do is sort of do a simple metric that says you're actually gaining something rather than losing something. Because the comments that I've heard over the past number of years that people have been discussing this is this loss of a great event, the annual town meeting, and this ability to stand up amongst your peers and say something, or get your mob together to do exactly what you just did. That I think is what's been supporting the continuation of this annual town meeting. It's a great social event. But I just think, as I recall, I took a look at the numbers, I don't know, a week or two ago, and there's something like 9,500 registered voters.
9,280.
Yeah, and it's just 10% of that get to the town meeting, or
100%.
and by the end of the town meeting, it could be 3%. And so it's just letting people know that they actually probably have more power through a representative form of government on big issues for the town. But is this an issue that this group wants to speak to with respect to the select board or not? And if it is, maybe we should get, I have no problem with asking both Curtis Barnes, who's number one, which is the very sort of amorphous one, and Jeff Carlson is the first name on Article 6, but they're a whole group of people, some of whom we've heard from before, like Roberto Santamaria, who's spoken to us during the pandemic. Do we want to have a meeting about that in the midst of everything else? I know this is an issue close to many hearts on this group. In a positive
you
way.
know,
Yeah.
Sorry, even though I'm not a member yet, my issue regarding this would really be, how does this change in form of government affect non-resident, non-voting taxpayers? Is one going to be better for non-voting taxpayers than the other? Obviously, we all care about what's best for the town overall and the island overall, but this one which form of government is better for us in this role?
Yeah, that is, I think, I'm glad you added that, because I think I was missing the important point for this group. Donna.
I was going to say this is an optimum time it's very advantageous because we are non-participating basically. So to support a new, perhaps some people would consider it radical, but I think it's more practical. And I think more can be done if you have a city council or something like that, and you have representatives from different sections of the island. You can have work done 12 months out of the year. You could meet to Curtis's point. I thought that his letter to the editor was very, very well written, and he went right to the point. Something like that. And for those of us who can't attend a town meeting, I've attended a couple of them, but the last couple of years I have not been on island during the town meeting. And this is a way for us to have a voice. I think it's very important. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. So why don't I see for a future meeting? And so we're dealing with May, and I don't know where this is on the FinCom agenda. But I think we should hear from the questions. Do we need to hear from both groups or one group? But for example, as Curtis, I wonder, does he have a problem with the Article 6, full soup to nuts proposal? Because his proposal is to what? Just have the town approve. Got it here someplace. Hold on. Just find Article 1. I think either I printed it out or I didn't print it out because it was so bare bones. Yeah, I'm afraid I didn't print it out. So I can't easily read. Oh, here it is, Article 1. To see if the town will vote to direct the select board to establish a committee for the purpose of studying the establishment of a town council form of government for the city and county of Nantucket, where one, the town council shall serve as legislative body, blah, blah, blah. And so it's a very generalized proposal, whereas the other is very specific. In terms of Jean's question, the benefit to us, to non-voting taxpayers, I think there will be a benefit, but the spending limit, I think on the Article 6 is like they can only authorize maybe $500,000 worth of spending before having to go to a sort of a referendum type of approval. And where we've seen things break down in the past that we thought would be beneficial to non-voting taxpayers and to voting taxpayers alike has been the road projects that are that would improve traffic flow in key areas of the town, which cost more than they go to the town meeting because they cost so much money. And of course, they only go to the town meeting because the select board has thinks that they should be done, and the finance committee thinks that they should be done. And then they get voted down because, you know, a couple of people who live where the improvement's going to be, or a favorite tree, or you know, sometimes there are good reasons. They're worried about school safety, but that could be handled in a different way than just turning down an entire project. So the few that I've seen where it makes a big difference, I think would probably make a positive difference. But and that positive difference would be even if the town council doesn't have the spending authority, I think it goes to a bigger group than just the, you know, 400 people that are left at the town meeting when the matter comes up for consideration. But that's just my own limited view. So what I'll do is we'll try to get this on an agenda for a more fulsome discussion at some point in the future, which raises the question of when should we meet again? Is it, when is it, then the meeting after this coming strong meeting is going to be, when is it?
I think there are two in a row here. I think there's one on December 5th and one on December 12th. The 12th, though, is just simply a public hearing. You know, it's an opportunity for the public to voice their views. So it's really it's not going to be a working meeting. So I think we could meet, what is it? I mean, again, depends on people's holiday schedules, but I would like the week that's like the 17th would be the next arguably meeting. I don't know. Bill, do you know when are we recessed after the 12th until January or not? I don't know.
I don't know yet.
So why don't we do tentatively? Let me just get my calendar up.
Oh, the 17th is going to be a problem for me, but I could do it I could be in the car.
Okay, let me just get December. So 17th is a Saturday, and so their meetings are typically on Mondays or Tuesdays, like the 19th to 20th it would be, or
Yeah, the 20th. It would be Tuesday. I don't think I'd be surprised if there's a meeting on the 20th. It's too close to Christmas.
okay. So why don't we do this? Maybe after the 5th, this long meeting of the 5th, and whatever the public meeting is. I think our notice requirements are, we have to file a notice, public notice of a meeting, if we're going to do a Saturday meeting, either like the Tuesday before or the Wednesday. I think it's the Wednesday before. And so why don't we
This week we should figure out this week.
Yeah,
If we need a meeting on the 17th or not.
yeah,
We'll know after the 5th.
we'll send a message around to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Donna.
Kathy had said originally that it would be the 17th and the 31st at 10. Are you suggesting that we change that?
I don't think the 31st is going to work for
I
anybody.
know.
The 17th is a
I wrote
possibility.
it down.
Yeah. So we'll
Okay.
we'll send a message around, 17th,
Okay.
yes or no, or when, yes or no. Really, the next meeting is up in the air. And we'll try to figure out when it should be and what the agenda will be. But clearly, I think the agenda will include short-term rentals and town government. Anything else, any other burning issues do you think need to be discussed at some future meeting? Yeah, Gary.
I just want to mention, with respect to the town charter change, that there was some discussion at the select board the other day that I didn't get the details of, but apparently, and I think that shouldn't change your proposal that we try to get the speakers, the people who are offering these articles in to talk to us, because what I heard them talking about was to do a change in government would be a lot more than just approving these warrant articles. It's you need a charter commission, and the town said that what they were saying at the select board meeting is that there are two ways to have the charter commission officially programmed. One way is for the annual town meeting to agree to set up a charter commission to change the form of government. The second way is for the select board itself. Now, if the town does it, they need a 2/3 majority or 3/4, whatever it is. It's a high, it's a super majority. But if the select board agrees to do that, all they have to do is just make that decision, and the select board would then be able to make the decision to set up a charter commission for the possible change of government. Anyway, we can get details when we speak to our next speakers.
Yeah, well, clearly I wonder if Article 1 then it just addresses that setting up a commission type of a thing. But the speakers maybe can explain it better to us. But I'm glad it sounds awfully complicated. And then I think at the end of the day, then the Attorney General probably has to approve
Like
whatever.
everything else.
Yeah. So
We're still waiting, by the way, they mentioned something at the select board as well. Half of the warrant articles that were approved at the last annual town meeting were home rule petitions. And so they have to get appointed, they have to get approved by the Attorney General.
Yeah.
So I've been asking the question, the old rule was in order to get a warrant article for the annual town meeting, all you need is 10 signatures. What we proposed and what we recommended and supported and what was approved by the town at the ATM was a minimum of 50 signatures instead of 10. But that was also waiting for the Attorney General. There was some reference the other day at the select board that said the Attorney General has finally signed off on all except one of the articles that were passed. The only one they haven't signed off on yet is the nudist topless beaches.
Some-
They want to touch that with a 10-foot pole, maybe.
Yeah, my recollection is that perhaps the town missed the deadline to submit these home rule changes to the Attorney General initially, and that may have delayed things or whatever. But I will, it's noted, and I will be sure to wear a shirt to the beach this summer. Do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved to second, Gary second, and all those in favor.
Aye.
I thank you all for attending it. Unfortunately, the US is losing 3-1 right
Oh,
now.
no.
9 minutes left in regulation time. Good to see everybody. I appreciate I'll just call the new folks coming, and we value your contributions. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
All right.